He was the undisputed heavyweight king, a man who stood face to face with Mike Tyson and walked away with millions. But now at 62, Evander Holyfield is almost unrecognizable, and the way it all unraveled is darker than anyone expected. What really happened behind closed doors? Was it a bad deal? Betrayal? Or was the greatest fight of his life the one he never saw coming? Because what he looks like now will really shock you. But before everything came crashing down, there was a time when Evander Holyfield's name echoed through every arena, and his journey to the top didn't start the way you'd think. The rise of a legend. Before the money vanished, there was a boy from Atmore, Alabama, who had something most kids didn't, that is, unshakable grit, and a dream that could fill an arena. Evander Holyfield was born on October 19, 1962, the youngest of 9 children, and raised by a single mother who worked long hours to keep the family afloat. Times were tough. The streets weren't forgiving. But Holyfield's focus wasn't on what he didn't have. It was on what he could become. When his family moved to Atlanta, that's where things really started to shift. He was just 7 when he walked into the local Boys and Girls Club and got his first pair of gloves. Something clicked, and he figured out that this was a calling, not solely a hobby. The ring gave him something the world hadn't. Purpose. And once he found it, he never looked back. By the time he was in his teens, Holyfield was making waves. At 15, he was already a regional champ. At 20, he won the National Golden Gloves Championship, an early sign that the kid from the projects wasn't only talented, he was different. He was disciplined, focused, and had a hunger to win. That wasn't about flash or fame. He wasn't trying to be the loudest guy in the room. He just wanted to be the best. And he nearly proved it on the world's biggest amateur stage, the Olympics. In 1984, Holyfield represented the United States in the Summer Games in Los Angeles. It should have been his moment, but in a controversial call that still sparks debate today, he was disqualified in the semifinals. He took home a bronze medal, but many believed he was robbed of the gold. Still, Holyfield didn't complain. He took the hit, learned from it, and did what he always did, kept moving forward. At age 21, he turned pro, stepping into the cruiserweight division with something to prove. And he did it. Fight after fight, Holyfield climbed the ranks, collecting belts like they were owed to him. By 1988, he had done what no one else had. He became the first undisputed cruiserweight champion in history. WBA, WBC, IBF, he had them all. That kind of sweep doesn't happen by accident. It happens when skill meets obsession. But Holyfield wasn't done. He set his sights on the heavyweight division, the big leagues. Many doubted him. He wasn't the biggest guy, and in heavyweight, size matters. But he wasn't trying to win on size. He was trying to win through his heart, that turned out to be his secret weapon. In 1990, he got his shot, and his opponent was James "Buster" Douglas, the man who had just shocked the world by knocking out Mike Tyson. Holyfield didn't only beat Douglas, he dismantled him. It took only 3 rounds. Just like that, he was the new, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. That win launched Holyfield into boxing royalty, but his biggest battles were still ahead, especially the ones against Tyson. In 1996, they finally faced off. Tyson was the heavy favorite, but Holyfield didn't blink. He outclassed Tyson and won by TKO in the 11th round. The world was stunned. But it was the rematch in 1997 that would go down in infamy. That was the night Tyson, frustrated and overwhelmed, bit Holyfield's ear in the 3rd round. The fight was stopped. Tyson was disqualified. Holyfield's calm under chaos was just another nudge. He wasn't called the real deal for nothing. And that nickname? It stuck for a reason. Holyfield wasn't flashy like some of his peers. He wasn't always the loudest voice in the press, but when he got in the ring, he backed up every word. He was honest, relentless, and unbelievably tough, not just physically, but mentally. He fought with his fists, yes, but he also fought with his faith, with his discipline, and with the kind of work ethic that doesn't get taught in gyms. It gets forged in life. Over his career, he became the only boxer in history to win the heavyweight world title 4 times, passing even Muhammad Ali. That's not merely talent, that's legacy. So before the lawsuits, the foreclosures, or the "what happened to him" questions, there was a young man who fought his way out of poverty and into greatness, a man who faced giants, both literal and metaphorical, and refused to back down, and that made him a legend. But becoming a legend inside the ring was just one part of the story. What came next took things to a whole new level, and not always in the way you'd expect. The height of fame and fortune. By the time Evander Holyfield had finished carving his name into the boxing history books, he was already a global phenomenon. The soft-spoken fighter from Atmore, Alabama, had become a household name, and with that fame came a fortune so large it seemed almost mythical. But what set Holyfield apart during this phase of his life wasn't the money he earned, it was the way he lived, the way he gave, and how, for a moment in time, he seemed untouchable. Let's start with the numbers. Over the course of his legendary career, Holyfield earned. That's not counting the millions he made from sponsorship deals, endorsements, and appearances. It's hard to wrap your head around that figure, especially considering his humble beginnings. This was a man who used to clean gym floors just to get time in the ring. Now, he was cashing checks that rivaled movie stars and CEOs. One of the biggest paydays of his career came during the rematch against Mike Tyson in 1997. The same bout that would go down in infamy after Tyson bit off a piece of Holyfield's ear. That fight alone earned Holyfield $33 million, and it wasn't even a big night for his bank account. It cemented his reputation as one of the most bankable, respected, and fearless fighters in the world. With money flowing in like a broken dam, Holyfield didn't hold back. He bought a 109-room mansion in the suburbs of Atlanta, a sprawling estate that seemed more like a resort than a home. It featured a 135-seat movie theater, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, a bowling alley, and even a dining room that could contain up to 100 people. This wasn't simply a place to live, it was more like a monument to everything he had worked for. And speaking of cars, he had a lot. We're talking Bentleys, Ferraris, Rolls-Royces. Not just one or two, but a collection worthy of a museum. He enjoyed the thrill of the engine and the luxury that came with it. For Holyfield, the goal wasn't to hoard wealth, it was to enjoy it and, more importantly, to share it. He was known for his generosity, sometimes to a fault. He financially supported family, friends, and an entourage that moved with him like a mobile village. If someone needed help, Holyfield didn't hesitate. He gave freely, believing it was his duty to take care of those around him. That kind of loyalty can be rare in the world of fame, and it's something people close to him never forgot. But Holyfield's influence wasn't limited to the ring or the luxury cars parked outside his mansion. He became a cultural icon in every sense of the word. He appeared on talk shows, reality TV, and in commercials. He was a familiar face even to those who had never watched a single round of boxing. His calm, respectful, grounded personality stood in stark contrast to the chaos that often surrounded the sport. Beyond entertainment, Holyfield used his platform for good. He started the Holyfield Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at helping underprivileged youth find opportunities in education and sports. Giving back wasn't a PR move for him, it was personal. He understood struggle, he'd lived it, and he wanted to be the bridge that helped others cross from hardship to hope. He also dipped his toes into business ventures, launching a record label, Real Deal Records, and partnering with various brands. The name The Real Deal wasn't merely a nickname, it was his brand, a symbol of authenticity, grit, and integrity. He was selling more than a product. He was selling a story, his story. And yet, even at the height of it all, Holyfield remained surprisingly grounded. People close to him often commented on his calm demeanor, how he never let the fame get to his head. That doesn't mean he didn't enjoy the perks. He did. But there was still a part of him that remembered the boy who wore hand-me-downs and ran through the streets of Atmore with dreams too big for his small-town surroundings. The truth is, few athletes experience the level of success Holyfield did, financially, culturally, and professionally. His story during this chapter reads like a blueprint for the American dream. A dream built on discipline, heart, and unshakable faith in himself. But as history often reminds us, every peak comes with its own shadows, and sometimes, the brighter the spotlight, the harder it is to see what's creeping in just beyond the glow. Things were looking picture-perfect from the outside. Big checks, big houses, and a bigger-than-life reputation. Yet, behind all the flashing cameras and applause, something had already started to shift. The cracks begin to show. From the outside, everything still looked golden. The big fights, the bright lights, public appearances. Evander Holyfield was still the real deal in every sense of the name. But behind the scenes, trouble had started to creep in, quietly at first, then louder, like a storm that doesn't just knock once, but rumbles before it roars. Let's start with the personal stuff, because that's where some of the earliest warning signs came from. Evander Holyfield was married 3 times and had 11 children with 5 different women. That's a lot of people to care for, and it came with a mountain of responsibility. The courts didn't care that he was a boxing legend. They cared about financial obligations. In just one of many child support cases, he was ordered to pay $36,000 a year, plus additional expenses for private schooling and college. And that was just for one child. Over time, these financial responsibilities began to accumulate. Holyfield's child support situation made headlines more than once, including reports that he owed hundreds of thousands in back payments. For someone who once made over $230 million in the ring, many fans were shocked to learn that his finances were under strain. But this was only one layer of a much bigger problem. The next red flag came from business decisions that didn't quite land. Like many athletes who come into wealth fast, Holyfield tried to branch out into ventures outside of boxing. But unfortunately, many of those turned into expensive lessons. From failed promotions to shaky real estate investments, the returns didn't match the risks. Some deals went south. Others never even got off the ground. As if that wasn't enough, the legal fees started rolling in. He faced multiple lawsuits, including one involving unpaid landscaping services for his estate, and another tied to disputes over memorabilia deals. These weren't minor scuffles. They were public, costly, and exhausting. And with every court date or legal filing, more money trickled out. Now let's talk about lifestyle, because this is where things start to really widen the cracks. At the height of his fame, remember we mentioned earlier that Holyfield built a mansion that has 109 rooms outside Atlanta that nearly defied logic? It had everything. But houses like that don't just sit pretty. They cost a fortune to maintain. Heating, staffing, upkeep. It all adds up. Then there were the cars, the jewelry, the generous handouts to friends and family. Holyfield wasn't known for being stingy. In fact, he was famous for being the opposite, more like generous, to a fault. He helped a lot of people, sometimes to the point of neglecting his own financial balance. Reports also suggest Holyfield spent time gambling in Vegas and Atlantic City, which may have also contributed to his financial decline. The spending didn't slow down, even as his boxing paydays became less frequent and significantly smaller. It's not easy going from millions per fight to the quieter grind of retirement. Some athletes scale back. Holyfield didn't, not quickly enough. One of the toughest parts of this chapter in his life was that the outside world still saw him as the untouchable champion. He had the look, he had the name, he had the history. But the man behind all that was starting to drown in legal bills, child support demands, and an unsustainable lifestyle. The spotlight didn't show the stress, but it was there. None of this takes away from what Holyfield accomplished. He earned every belt, every cheer, and every dollar the hard way. But when the money came, it came fast. And when it went even faster. By this point, the cracks were no longer hidden. They were out in the open, too large to ignore and too deep to patch up overnight. Holyfield was still standing, still trying to keep it all together. But the heavyweight world champion who once conquered giants was now fighting a new kind of battle. One that didn't happen in the ring. And this time, the punches weren't only physical, they were financial, emotional, and deeply personal. What started as a few cracks soon turned into something harder to ignore, and before long, the weight of it all began to pull everything down. The fall. How Holyfield lost it all. At one point, it looked like Evander Holyfield had done it all. He was a champion in the ring, a household name outside of it, and the kind of success story that made headlines for all the right reasons. But as history has often shown, especially with athletes who skyrocket to fame and fortune, what goes up doesn't always come down gently. For Holyfield, the fall wasn't immediate. It happened slowly at first, then all at once. It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when things started to unravel, but by the time the 2008 financial crisis hit, Holyfield's empire was already sitting on shaky ground. His massive 109-room mansion in Fayetteville, Georgia, which was the crown jewel of his lifestyle. It wasn't just a home, it was a statement. But when the housing market collapsed, so did the illusion of permanence. The mansion was eventually foreclosed and sold off for just $7.5 million. That sounds like a hefty price, but it was actually less than half of what it was worth at its peak. Worse still, Holyfield still owed millions on the mortgage. In interviews, he admitted the house was too big, too costly, and too much to keep up with. It was a harsh symbol of what happens when income slows down, but expenses don't. The real trouble, though, wasn't just in one property. Holyfield's financial problems went deeper than bricks and mortar. At one point, he owed over £10 million in debts, spread across various obligations: child support, unpaid taxes, failed investments, and legal fees. Service providers like landscaping companies and contractors came forward with lawsuits. The IRS even pursued him aggressively, demanding full payment of outstanding taxes and penalties. Years of unpaid taxes meant penalties, interest, and the threat of asset seizures. With bills piling up and revenue drying up, Holyfield had to start letting go of the very things that once defined his greatness. In what was dubbed by some as the world's biggest sale of sporting memorabilia, Holyfield auctioned off a long list of personal treasures. His 1984 Olympic bronze medal? Gone. His championship belts? Gone. His prized 1962 Chevrolet Corvette? Also gone. The sale wasn't only a way to make money. It was a last-ditch attempt to hold off creditors and keep himself above water. And then came the public humiliation. For a man who once stood toe-to-toe with Mike Tyson and beat him, being dragged into court over unpaid child support was a different kind of pressure outside the ring. Holyfield fathered 11 children with multiple women. That kind of family responsibility comes with long-term financial commitments, and when he failed to meet those obligations, the consequences were severe. In one case, he was held in contempt for failing to pay over $500,000 in child support. The judge warned him that jail time was a real possibility if he didn't pay up. On top of that, there were health concerns. As he got older and continued fighting to try and make ends meet, some states banned him from stepping into the ring over concerns about his well-being. Boxing commissions worried about the toll the sport had taken on his body, and as regulations tightened, so did his ability to earn a paycheck the only way he really knew how. By this point, the fall was impossible to ignore. Holyfield wasn't just a man in debt. He was a man trying to cling to the last pieces of a life that had changed dramatically. And yet, perhaps what made it all the more heartbreaking was that his fall wasn't due to a single mistake or reckless moment. It was a series of decisions, a handful of miscalculations, and a lifestyle that simply couldn't be sustained without the steady millions that once rolled in. The man who once had it all found himself starting over in many ways. And while some people mocked the headlines or judged from afar, the truth is, Holyfield's story isn't rare. It's just more visible. Strip away the spotlight, and you'll find that a lot of people, even those outside the ring, can relate to what it feels like to lose more than you thought possible. The fall may have been steep, but it also became part of a story that was far from over. Even after losing almost everything, Holyfield's story didn't end there. What came next wasn't a comeback in the ring, but it revealed something even more unexpected. Life after the fortune. Evander Holyfield at 62 is no longer the man who stood on top of the boxing world. Time, like a quiet referee, has slowly counted down the moments, and what's left is a man trying to find peace in the aftershocks of fame, fortune, and fierce battles. He's not broke, but he's nowhere near the financial powerhouse he once was. After losing his 109-room mansion, Holyfield now lives in a far more modest downtown condominium. The shift wasn't about downsizing. It was about starting over. Once worth hundreds of millions, his net worth is now estimated at around $500,000. That number might sound decent on paper, but compared to where he once stood, it's a steep fall. Health-wise, the effects of his long, punishing boxing career have started to show. There have been visible signs like slurred speech, slower movements that have caused concern among fans and professionals alike. Some wonder if it's early signs of brain damage, the kind that comes from too many punches absorbed over decades. Add in his history of a heart condition that once led to a temporary retirement from the sport. Emotionally, it hasn't been any easier. Holyfield once admitted, in a moment that felt brutally honest, "Dealing with all the mothers of all my kids, there ain't no winning here, man. No winning at all. I've had no money to pay lawyers and had to fight on my own in court, and that ain't easy." That line alone tells you everything you need to know. Beyond the lights and the legacy, there was a man buried under personal battles and legal headaches. Still, the fighter in him refused to stay down. Even in his late 50s, Holyfield wasn't ready to hang up the gloves completely. He entertained the idea of a return to the ring. In fact, in 2021, he actually stepped back in for an exhibition match, which ended in a disappointing and dangerous knockout loss. It seemed like he couldn't let go of the ring, and maybe the ring couldn't quite let go of him either. As of now, Holyfield isn't hiding from the world, but he's no longer center stage. He now lives a simpler, more careful life, far removed from the chaos of his peak years. Were you shocked to see what Evander Holyfield looks like today? And what would you have done differently if you were in his shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. To enjoy more content like this, tap on the next video on your screen.